Lucas Johnson, an arrogant millionaire, never imagined that a humble nurse passionate about teaching children in a neighborhood would shake his beliefs about success and merit. But when he confronted her, he discovered that true value is never found in a bank account. An unexpected love arises amidst challenges and judgments. Let us know in the comments which city you're watching from and rate this story from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very valuable. Leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more exciting stories like this. It was almost 6 in the morning when Helen Smith left the clinic after yet another grueling shift. The hallway still seemed to breathe the strong smell of medications and hurried cleaning. Each step on the cold floor dragged her accumulated fatigue, but the routine did not allow her to rest. She still had hours ahead to fulfill her other mission, the small tutoring project for the children in the community. Through the narrow streets of the neighborhood, the air was humid, mixed with the scent of fresh bread wafting from distant bakeries and the noise of the first cars heading to work. The heavy backpack hung from her shoulder, carrying books and notebooks that for many would be trash, but for her, they were life. Arriving at the small classroom that served as a teaching space, the smell of fresh coffee and old paper filled the makeshift room. The children smiled as they waited, full of energy and bright eyes, a vivid contrast to the simple wooden structure and torn fabric that supported the place. While organizing the faded workbooks, Helen felt a different weight in the environment, a new, firm presence that did not belong to that routine. She turned to hear a harsh voice cutting through the warm morning air. "These children deserve more than this pile of paper and worn fabric. Will this even make a difference?" asked the man, disdain etched in his voice. It was Lucas Johnson, known for his fortune and the chain of private clinics he ran in New York, a symbol of the luxury world now there, disturbing the simplicity of that place. Helen did not allow herself to swallow the discomfort, keeping her gaze fixed on him, and with a light smile replied, "Perhaps you don't understand, but here they learn," she said without hesitation. More than the content, they learn to want more from life. He crossed his arms, his tailored suit contrasting with the dirt floor and simple chairs. In a firm tone, he retorted, "Ignoring the harsh reality and betting on cheap dreams is easy when you live in your protected little world. Real education requires investment, structure, a real path to success." Helen's gaze narrowed, her words laden with a sincerity that, more than courage, seemed to challenge him. "And you, Dr. Johnson, do you know what these children face just to step into a school? Or do you only care for those who can pay your price?" A heavy silence fell over the room. The children watched in silence, caught in that silent dispute, their wide eyes reflecting the flame that Helen kept alive among piles of books and fatigue. Lucas took a step toward her, letting out a cynical smile. "I deal with what exists in the real world, Helen. The rest is romanticism that doesn't pay bills." And Helen, adjusting her coffee-stained blue uniform, replied as if speaking to each child there. "In the world you don't see, what sustains life is love and resilience, not money in the bank." Before leaving, he broke the silence with a cold and direct declaration. "I am Lucas Johnson, owner of the largest chain of private clinics in New York. I don't believe in miracles, only in results." She looked back at him firmly. "I am Helen Smith, a nurse and teacher," she said, her tone heavy with dignity. "Miracles may not exist, but the will to change the world does. And that cannot be bought." The encounter ended there, but neither of them would forget that morning, nor the impact of the contrast between them. The distant sound of the city waking filled the spaces as he left, his boots heading to a luxurious car, while she remained amidst the fragile walls of that small room filled with hope and struggle. Lucas walked back to his universe of concrete, glass, and air conditioning, his mind spinning around that woman who didn't fit into any of his previous categories. Helen, in turn, felt a strange fire mixing anger and curiosity, a spark that challenged everything she should feel in front of someone like him. The sun, breaking through the clouds, announced the start of the day, illuminating both the neighborhood and the tall buildings in the distance, separating and uniting the worlds of those two who, unknowingly, were about to intertwine their paths in a twist that even fate could not foresee. The morning in Brooklyn became a silent witness to a clash between prejudices and wills, where what seemed irrational could turn into the truest of feelings. And thus began the unexpected clash between the light of money and the fiber of the heart. In a New York that pulses with contradictions and dreams, this was just the first chapter, a challenge that both would have to face and, who knows, overcome together. The sun had already reached its place in the sky when Helen saw Lucas Johnson again. It wasn't planned, nor was it comfortable. She was in the small courtyard where the children usually did outdoor activities, arranging sheets of paper and colored chalk on the ground for the class that would start soon, when he appeared right there, among the irregular brick houses and the peeling paint of the walls. "Hello, Helen. I hope I'm not interrupting your routine," he said, his voice firm but with a less arrogant tone than before. First meeting. She, who was crouched down sewing letters and numbers with the little ones, froze, her expression a mix of surprise and suspicion. Not exactly the place where I imagine a luxury clinic owner feeling at ease. "What do you want here?" Lucas gave a slight smile, maintaining his composure. "The truth is that our conversation the other day stuck with me. Maybe it's my curiosity," he admitted, gesturing broadly to the children who were beginning to gather around, the untouched joy on their little faces. Helen crossed her arms, always ready for a sharp defense. Curiosity can be an invitation to learning, or a pretext for judgments. His grey eyes fixed on her for a long moment, as if he were trying to find the answer to something that had never been said. "Maybe both," he replied, not losing his ironic tone. "But I came to see for myself. Do these kids, do they really benefit from these classes?" One of the children, a boy with a dirty face and very lively eyes, raised his hand shyly. "I learned to read with Miss Helen," he said, his voice trembling, and the smile that followed made his insecurity disappear. Helen felt warmth spread through her chest, a mix of pride and tenderness that so many exhausting days couldn't erase. "So, for you, these meetings are important." Lucas looked at the children, at the cracked cement floor, at the graffiti-covered walls, and an almost reverent silence fell. He turned to Helen, but before he could speak, her voice interrupted him, half playful, half challenging. "If you want, you can try a class. Who knows, you might learn something that money can't buy." Lucas chuckled softly, a sound that didn't match the type of person he seemed to be. It was the first time he laughed almost genuinely there, in that community he deemed distant. "Who knows, I might do well," he replied, accepting the implicit challenge. Helen pulled him closer, showing where the children were sitting in a circle, their curious eyes now focused on that strange visitor. As he tried to capture the children's attention, stumbling over names, responses, and the spontaneity of that setting, Lucas couldn't help but feel something strange. Something beyond frustration or discomfort. It was fascination. After a while, Helen invited him to sit next to her. The noise of traffic outside the neighborhood seemed distant, muffled by the laughter and cheerful conversation that filled the space. "How do you think you did?" she asked, her voice laden with humor. He shrugged awkwardly. "I survived, but I thought it would be a festival of complaints." Helen smiled, looking at her hands intertwined in her lap. "What you see here is resilience. These children don't have the advantages that your school would offer, but they have a will that no amount of money can buy." Lucas looked at her, the first crack in his armor of skepticism opening up. In front of those little faces that captured his attention more and more, an internal contradiction arose. How could someone so powerful even imagine that his perspective could be so limited? I was raised to believe that success is measured by what you have, not by what you give, he admitted, lowering his guard a bit. Helen blinked, understanding the unspoken confession. Well, I've always believed that what makes us rich is what's in the heart, she said in a soft whisper, as if sharing a secret. Lucas let out a sigh, watching the blue sky beginning to open up beyond the makeshift houses. Maybe I have a lot to learn, he said with a sincerity that surprised them both. The initial tension was replaced by a lighter conversation, filled with restrained laughter and gentle teasing, where prejudices slowly melted away, replaced by curiosity and a kind of shy admiration. After that day, Lucas began to make silent appearances, observing from a distance, learning without announcing himself, while Helen continued to divide her time and energy between the clinic and the community. In that uncomfortable coexistence lay the seed of something new, a long path that neither of them imagined where it would end, but that certainly began there, amidst differences and unexpected encounters. Helen felt her heart race whenever he showed up, a mix of surprise and a force that pulled her out of her known world. Lucas saw in that woman the courage that his wealth could never buy. And so, amidst the music of children's laughter, the dust of the streets of Brooklyn, and the shy smiles, a tension was born that mixed provocation and affection. The clash between two universes began to create bridges under the watchful eye of the city that observed, impassive and changing every moment. Their story was just beginning, and it already promised to transform everything around. Let's do an experiment. Whoever is following this story, write in love in the comments. Your participation is very important. The fine drizzle falling over Brooklyn made the air humid and infused with the scent of wet earth mixed with the sweet aroma of fresh coffee that Helen was preparing on an improvised griddle, right next to the small classroom where she taught the community's children. It was a grey afternoon, typical of autumn in New York, but for that woman with a firm gaze, every moment there had a special glow, a flame of resilience that no storm could extinguish. As she adjusted the papers and pencils scattered on the makeshift table, one of the girls, with curious eyes and trembling hands from the cold, tugged at the blue sleeve of her paint-stained uniform and asked softly, "Teacher, who is that gentleman who always comes here?" Helen turned slowly, and her eyes soon found Lucas Johnson, standing in the shadow of a sarcastic wall, arms crossed. But it seemed he just wanted to learn to be invisible. A hesitant smile appeared on his face. His lips were almost an invitation for the children to let their curiosity surface without fear. "His name is Lucas," she said, her tone hiding her own surprise at seeing him there, so different from the businessman she thought she knew. At that moment, his silent presence felt stronger than any word, awakening in the little ones a delicate mix of admiration and strangeness. Lucas, who rarely allowed himself to be seen without the armor of facts and figures, was there, somewhat lost, somewhat discovering a world he couldn't buy. The next day, Helen, with the courage that was so characteristic of her, issued a direct challenge. "How about coming with me to see my private clinic? I want you to know what my universe is like." Lucas frowned, surprised and taken aback. This wasn't the kind of invitation he usually accepted, especially from someone he barely knew. But there was something in her determined gaze that made him agree, even without knowing what he expected to find. When he entered the clinic, the contrast was almost shocking. Shiny floors, air conditioning so cold it made his nose tingle, silent corridors where the whispers of the staff echoed like secrets kept under lock and key. There, everything exuded money and status, and yet a strange emptiness seemed to linger in the air. Helen watched him, well aware of that feeling he didn't want to show but couldn't hide. "Here you have everything, but you still feel alone," she said, as if speaking softly so only he could hear. Lucas looked away, a rare gesture of vulnerability. I grew up surrounded by expectations that crushed any attempt to be myself. My father taught me to be strong, but not how to love, he confided, his voice almost a whisper. She felt the space between them narrow, a connection that needed no artifice. I understand, she replied, gently squeezing his arm. Growing up carrying the world, pretending everything is fine, while inside, every day is a battle. From then on, their meetings became more frequent and less formal. Lucas was no longer just passing through. He was allowing himself to get closer, uncertain but eager to understand a life that until then had only been a distant backdrop. Sometimes he watched the children running, their laughter breaking the heavy silence of the neighborhood. Other times he listened to Helen's stories and those of the residents, tales that no economic balance sheet could translate. Deep down, he found himself inspired by the courage of those people and by Helen's determination, who, despite everything, carried a strength in her heart that no amount of money could buy. But time was not their friend. Helen's mother's health was visibly deteriorating, and the cost of treatment seemed an insurmountable wall. Silently, she fought against her pride, trying to understand how far she could go to save someone who meant the world to her. Lucas, for his part, felt the pressure mounting. This was a decisive moment where power, love, and vulnerability intertwined painfully, almost cruelly. One night, as the city seemed to sleep, Helen, exhausted and with a tear-streaked face, found the strength to speak what she had kept in her heart until then. "I need your help. I don't know if I can do this alone," she confessed, her voice trembling not only from fatigue, but from the weight of insecurities. Lucas looked at her with eyes that seemed to see beyond appearances, beyond differences. "I don't care what the world thinks I should be. What matters is what I can do for you." In that instant, the pieces shifted. Pride gave way to courage, and the barriers erected by fear and pride began to crumble. As the massive, impersonal city continued its fast pace, in the heart of that forgotten neighborhood, two clashing worlds discovered new paths to walk together. The story of Helen and Lucas was not meant to be easy, but it promised to be intense, true, and transformative. And for you who follows this journey, how about leaving a comment and sharing your emotions? Your voice is part of this story. After all, who is in love with this journey full of contrasts, sensitivity, and hope? Don't forget to write "in love" in the comments and share it with those you love. Your participation is the fuel that keeps this narrative alive. Night fell over Brooklyn with the weight of heavy clouds, and the fine drizzle turned the dirt streets into slippery trails. Lucas walked slowly to the simple house where Helen lived with her sick mother. His elegant suit seemed out of place in that humble setting, and yet each step of that wealthy man was an unusual gesture in such a harsh and real reality. He felt the urgency pulsing in the air and the pressure of a decision he could no longer delay. When he entered, Helen's tired red eyes sought his, revealing the silent battle they faced. Her face was marked by sleepless nights and the fear of losing the only person she had left. "It's getting worse," she confided, her voice hoarse. "Time is against us, and the treatment costs more than I can bear." Lucas felt the weight of her words, the chasm that separated the stories each carried. There was no spreadsheet or business strategy that could solve what they were facing. "I'll take care of this," he promised, with a firmness that sounded both like a challenge and a plea. "I want to ensure your mother gets the best care." Helen hesitated, pride and need in conflict. Accepting help meant giving up parts of herself, but she knew she had no choice. The next day, at a small diner nearby, they sat down to negotiate what was most complicated. After all, saving her mother had a price that went far beyond money. "I want to pay for the treatment," Lucas said, placing a folder on the table. "But I want something in return." Helen raised her eyebrows, already suspicious. "And what would that be?" You will be my companion at social events and meetings for the next 6 months. I need to show the world that I have someone by my side, solidifying my image." She stared at him, surprised and uncomfortable. "Are you asking me to pretend to be your girlfriend?" "It's a business deal," Lucas explained, trying to soften the blow. "You help me maintain a stable image. I help save your mother." The proposal hit both of them, being more than just a simple contract. It was a plunge into disparate worlds that for the first time intertwined in a deep and painful way. Helen felt a chill run down her spine, thinking of the look she would face, the stories she would have to act out, but the urgency spoke louder. 6 months, not a day more, she warned, determined, extending her hand to seal the deal that had no turning back. With the agreement sealed, their days became a delicate dance between glamour and discomfort. Helen wore dresses she never imagined she would wear, tried expensive perfume, and experienced the muffled sounds of luxurious ballrooms, while Lucas discovered in her simple stories the humanity that his high-rise offices had never shown him. But the path was not smooth. Lucas's family cast judgmental glances at him, questioning a choice that seemed to contradict everything he had always valued. "You're playing with fire," his brother warned. "She doesn't belong to our world." Lucas felt the sting of those words, the struggle between what was expected and what his heart began to claim for itself. In the neighborhood, Helen faced veiled disdain and malicious whispers. Some saw her new life as a betrayal, others as something unattainable for them. She carried this silent pressure, cutting deeper than any negotiation. One night after an event, the nearly empty ballroom, dim lights and the sweet smell of chocolate truffles still in the air, Lucas squeezed Helen's hand. "This isn't a game for me," he said, his voice low and sincere. She searched his eyes for the answer she also felt pulsing within herself. "It never was," she replied, her breath trembling as the world around them faded away. Living between two universes, facing the cruelly distinct expectations, they discovered that the true challenge was to trust each other, even in the face of uncertainties and evident differences. While New York continued its fierce routine, in that small neighborhood, two hearts beat in the same rhythm, writing a story that blended pain, courage, and the unbreakable hope of love that defies worlds. And you who follows this intense and twist-filled journey, how about sharing your excitement in the comments? Write "enthralled" and help spread this story, because it is with you that it gains life and strength to continue. Your like, your comment, and your share are what keep this flame alive. The sun was just crawling over the horizon of Brooklyn when Helen woke up, feeling the weight of a restless night in her body. The silence of the simple house held the tired sigh of her sick mother in the next room, wrapped in a fragile and unsettling atmosphere. Helen put on her faded grey shirt and worn jeans, the ones that already bore the marks of a hard life, and fastened the colorful bracelet her niece had given her, a talisman of hope and strength. As she walked through the streets dampened by the recent rain, Helen's steps blended with the strong smell of asphalt and the forgotten flowers on the sidewalk. Her heart raced with the silent questions hammering in her mind. How do I face this new world alongside Lucas? Can I pretend to belong without losing who I am? On the other side of the city, in an office in the heart of Fifth Avenue, Lucas turned his suit and tie into armor against his own emotions. The image of Helen, simple and straightforward, wouldn't leave his mind. For the first time, he felt vulnerable, responsible for someone other than himself. When Helen arrived, the contrast between them seemed even greater. She, with her understated simplicity and determined gaze, he, equipped with all the etiquette of high society, trying to hide the tension that the meeting caused him. "Ready for the first day?" Lucas asked, a bit uncertain. "No, but I have no choice," Helen replied, trying to steady herself. The journey to the mirrored building of the meeting revealed to Helen the multiple faces of New York, the imposing skyscrapers rising alongside forgotten communities, a city of extremes as latent as her own insecurities. As she crossed the vast, cold marble lobby, she felt the weight of curious and judgmental gazes. The sound of her heels echoed like a reminder of her inadequacy in that elegant and impersonal space. In the meeting, surrounded by executives and investors, Helen barely understood some terms, but her presence was essential for Lucas and for the pact that united them. "Are you keeping up?" he asked quietly, when she seemed to get lost among jargon. "I'm here," she replied, her voice firm, hiding the fear that pulsed inside her. Between meetings, events, and formal lunches, Helen learned to control her posture, to disguise her shyness, and to participate in the games of power. But even immersed in that universe, she perceived the barriers that still separated her from that world of wealth and convenience. In this environment, the glances and muffled comments didn't take long to arise. In one such instance, she heard the venomous whisper of an elegant woman who took advantage of the comfort of privacy to belittle her. "She shouldn't be here. She's not one of us." Lucas, noticing the veiled disdain, couldn't hold back. "Don't underestimate who I chose to have by my side." His firm voice disarmed the tension. The weather brought a contained respect. Helen felt, for the first time in that environment, that she was not alone in the invisible struggle she was fighting. Later, in a modest coffee shop near Brooklyn, she and Lucas shared a rare moment of sincerity. "I never imagined it would be so difficult to navigate between these two worlds," Helen confessed, her eyes glistening. Lucas held her hands, conveying reassurance. Maybe these worlds need to meet for something real to be born. In silence, they agreed that the path would be filled with challenges, but the desire to try and trust was stronger than pride and prejudice. As the metropolis pulsed frantically, a love was born there that defied differences, embracing pain, courage, and hope, a connection that promised to transform their lives forever. And you who follow this exciting story full of surprises, how about leaving a comment declaring that you are in love? Share it with those you love and help this plot reach more hearts. Your like, comment, and share are what keep this narrative alive and vibrant, growing with every word from you. The clock struck almost midnight when Lucas closed the door of his luxurious apartment in Manhattan. The city below still buzzed, but inside that spacious and silent space the restlessness echoed that would not let him be at peace. In the dark brown leather sofa he sank, hands intertwined, and gaze lost in the distant lights of the metropolis. Helen, on the other hand, walked through the quiet alleys of Brooklyn, the sweat from her daily journey trickling down her face, mixed with the restlessness that had already taken residence in her heart. Each day in that new world was filled with discoveries, but also with doubts and invisible pressures that hurt without leaving visible scars. The agreement that united them, imposed by circumstances, began to reveal its more complex nuances, not only in social coexistence, but in the emotions that silently challenged them. Lucas blamed himself for stepping into delicate territory, where Helen's pride in her humble past met resistance in the universe he knew so well. On a Monday morning, the ringtone of his phone broke the silence of the executive's apartment. Lucas answered hurriedly, and on the other end of the line, his mother, Mrs. Johnson, had a tone that fluctuated between concern and familial authority. "Lucas, we need to talk about this situation with Helen. This isn't just a whim of yours, you know. The family is uncomfortable." He closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the usual pressure tighten around his throat. "Mom, I've already told you that this woman is important to me. This goes beyond what you think. I know that, but sometimes what you want isn't what's best for you." The conversation ended with the promise of a family dinner to discuss Lucas's future and, indirectly, Helen's. On the same day, Helen received unexpected news. Her mother's health had worsened, requiring more intensive care and treatment that she could not afford on her own. The pressure in her chest tightened like an invisible hand, mixing fear and urgency. Not knowing who to turn to at that moment, Helen pushed away the dark thoughts and focused on the strength she still had. But the news did not escape Lucas's radar, who soon sought her out during a break at the office. What happened? His voice was filled with genuine concern. She swallowed her tears, trying to maintain her composure. My mom will need care. Things we can't manage here. Her voice faltered for a moment before she gathered the strength to continue. Maybe I need to stay longer in Brooklyn to take better care of her. Lucas held her hands, the warmth of his touch anchoring her in that turbulent sea of emotions. We'll figure this out. I want to help, Helen. Her gaze met his, and in that moment, they both felt something beyond the business commitment made months ago. The boundary between the agreement and affection was becoming increasingly thin. The day of the family dinner arrived at Lucas's home, a grand mansion with heavy furniture and walls adorned with portraits that conveyed traditions and legacies. Helen entered wearing a discreet yet elegant dress, trying to carry the confidence she was still seeking. The expressions she received were not the most welcoming. Family members observed her with a mix of curiosity, judgment, and even a subtle disdain, revealing the social chasm that separated them. Helen, it's a pleasure to finally meet you, Mrs. Johnson said with a contained smile, but her eyes sought to understand who the woman was that had captured her son's heart. As the night progressed, veiled conversations arose among relatives, insinuating doubts about her place in that family. I'm afraid Lucas is deluding himself, the older brother confided, with a careful yet firm tone. This difference in worlds could bring problems he hasn't yet realized. Lucas stared at them, silent, his gaze showing a firm resolve not to back down in the face of prejudice. When the food was just a memory and the house quieted down, Lucas took Helen outside to the garden lit by yellow lanterns, casting dancing shadows among the leaves. They will never understand what I feel for you, he said, his voice low. Maybe they never need to understand, she replied, trying to balance vulnerability and strength. What matters is that we understand. At the end of the night, before they said their goodbyes, Helen saw something indefinable on Lucas's face, at once a promise and a fear, the courage she needed and the dread that everything was about to break apart. In the following weeks, facing family pressures, health crises with her mother, and the commitments of the agreement, they found fleeting moments to reaffirm what was growing between them, a feeling that challenged protocols, expectations, and their own ghosts. And so, while New York served as the backdrop for this story of resistance and passion, Helen and Lucas remained intertwined in a delicate dance, where each step, no matter how small, meant moving toward an uncertain but intensely lived future. You, who feel the intensity of this love amidst adversity, how about leaving your comment saying, "In love"? Share this story and help this plot reach more hearts. Your like, comment, and share are the fuel that keeps this narrative alive, growing with each reader who feels moved. The routine between Helen and Lucas became a mosaic of small challenges and great discoveries, each trying to balance the scale between the past and the present, between what was expected and what pulsed in their hearts. The contract, which once seemed a formality, now carried the weight of emotions that neither dared to name openly. On a hot, late afternoon, the golden light of sunset filtered through the windows of Lucas's apartment, painting the environment with soft hues. Helen absent-mindedly stirred the coffee cups while he prepared the ground for a conversation they both knew was inevitable. "Helen," Lucas began, his voice firm yet gentle, "we need to talk about what's happening between us. We can't pretend it's just a deal anymore." She took a deep breath, feeling the knot tighten in her stomach. "I feel it too, but I'm scared. Scared that everything will fall apart, that our differences will destroy us." Lucas stepped closer, his eyes fixed on hers, revealing the complicity that had silently grown between them. "I can't promise it will be easy. On the contrary, there will be battles, there will be resistance, but I want to try, Helen. I want more than the game we've played so far. I want you for real." The words opened a space that had previously hung between them, and Helen allowed herself a rare vulnerability. What if we lose everything? Family, the life we know. Then we build another one. Together, he said, taking her hands in his, feeling her warm skin and delicate fingers. In the following days, this conversation reverberated in their actions, bringing a new courage that illuminated even the darkest moments. Lucas began to protect her not only from society's advances, but from the doubts that consumed her, and Helen started to see in him not just the arrogant man she imagined, but a partner, someone willing to fight for a feeling that grew with each passing moment. However, it wasn't long before the consequences of this decision manifested. Lucas's brother, dissatisfied with the way things were going, decided to take action. At a tense dinner where words were chosen like blades, he confronted his brother with a veiled ultimatum. "Lucas, do you know what you're doing? This isn't just a whim. Your choice could destroy important alliances for the family." Lucas's gaze did not waver. "Maybe my big mistake was never thinking about my happiness. But I won't give it up now. Not for alliances, not for tradition." On the other side of the city, Helen faced her own silent enemies. Her mother's health had worsened, requiring more care and time, a demand that directly competed with her obligations alongside Lucas. Guilt consumed her in moments of silence, when the pain of distance loomed like an unyielding shadow. On one of those days, after an exhausting shift, Helen found a letter at her doorstep with the seal of the company where she worked. She opened it with trembling fingers, discovering that her position would be at risk if she couldn't balance her commitments with Lucas and family care. She sat on the simple sofa in the living room, letting silent tears fall. Emotional exhaustion brought her down, and for a moment every piece of that complicated puzzle seemed ready to collapse. It was then that her phone vibrated, a message from Lucas. "I'm here. We'll get through this together." She smiled for the first time in that moment, finding in those words the strength to continue. In the following days, they sought solutions, divided tasks, and reinvented their routines. Helen began to rely on friends in the neighborhood to help care for her mother, and Lucas expanded his circle of allies to protect the future they were starting to build. On a Sunday afternoon, together on his apartment balcony, they looked out at the horizon of New York, the city pulsing below like a living, chaotic force. "Do you think we can make it?" Helen asked, still uncertain. "I know we can, because it's not just love. It's struggle, resistance. We are made for this." He smiled, and this time there were no doubts in that smile. As the sky turned shades of pink and the distant noise of cars continued, Helen and Lucas surrendered to the brief shared silence. A pause before the next steps, a silent promise that, come what may, they would face together the battles that life had in store for them. And you, who follow this intense story full of challenges, how about leaving your comment saying, "In love"? Share this plot with your friends and help spread this love that endures. Your like, your comment, and share are the energy that keeps this story alive and strong, growing with each new reading and shared emotion. The morning dawned powerful and clear, sunlight firmly invading the rooms of the Upper East Side apartment, where Helen and Lucas shared more than just a physical space. They now shared the dreams and uncertainties that permeated this new life. The aroma of fresh coffee mingled with the muffled sound of cars beginning to fill the city streets, as they planned a future that seemed, at once, full of hope and challenges yet to come. Have you thought about how we will handle the media's reaction? Helen asked, placing the cup down with a slight tremor in his hand, while his eyes sought steadiness in Lucas Johnson's face. He sighed, adjusting his blazer over his shoulder, his gaze lost for a moment in the vastness of the metropolis unfolding from the window. Not yet, but I know they will try to take us down. They want to paint us as a spectacle, he said, his voice carrying a mix of fatigue and determination. But I also know that this story is bigger than headlines. It's about the truth we build. Helen Smith smiled, feeling the weight of the world become a little more bearable beside that man who, despite his own ghosts, was willing to fight for them. It was a contrast to the parallel lives they led, but also a union of forces that was beginning to take deep roots. That same day, Lucas called a strategic meeting with his team in an office with a panoramic view capturing vibrant New York. The sheer curtains filtered natural light as he laid out the plan to confront the press and the social media filled with judgments and speculations. "We cannot allow rumors to destroy everything we have built," he spoke firmly, his eyes shining with a vein of vulnerability well hidden beneath the CEO mask. "We will control the narrative, show who we really are." Among the advisors, some smiled discreetly, while others exchanged worried glances. The company needed that clear message, and Lucas knew that this time the battle was personal. Meanwhile, Helen faced her own turmoil. The routine at the clinic, caring for her mother, and the never-ending social commitments left her in a state of almost palpable exhaustion. The Brooklyn community, though full of solidarity, also carried doubts about her choices, and she struggled not to lose herself between what she wanted to be and what circumstances imposed. On a drizzly afternoon, Helen received an unexpected visit. Mrs. Thompson, the oldest neighbor in the neighborhood, known for her generous heart and sharp tongue, appeared with a package of homemade cookies and a look filled with affection and concern. "My dear, you have been a warrior," Mrs. Thompson said in a hoarse voice as she sat in the modest living room. "But don't forget to take care of yourself too, okay? Sometimes we throw ourselves for others and forget that life requires balance." Helen squeezed the woman's hand, feeling the wrinkles like lines of the very history they shared. Those words were a balm, a reminder that resilience needed to be accompanied by care and comfort. That same night, as they met for a discreet dinner in a cafe in Greenwich Village, Lucas surprised Helen with a different invitation. "How about a real getaway this weekend?" he asked, his voice inviting. "No commitments, no judging eyes, just us." She hesitated, doubts swirling around her, but the promise of escaping for a while ignited a sweet and necessary hope. "I accept," she replied, smiling despite the turmoil in her mind. The weekend arrived with a spectacle of blue skies and fresh winds. They headed to the Catskill Mountains, where small cabins hidden among pines and waterfalls offered a breath for the soul. There, far from the noise and expectations of the city, Helen and Lucas rediscovered each other in a simple, vulnerable, and genuine way. On the cabin porch, wrapped in blankets and the scent of pine, they talked for hours about fears, dreams, and the uncertain future that awaited them. Life seemed to regain the shine of lightness, even in the face of the storms they had crossed. "I don't want you to change who you are," Lucas said, looking deeply into her eyes. "I want to walk beside you with all your roots and wings." Helen felt tears burning, not from pain but from a love that was solidifying, strong and resilient. But the escape did not erase the threats that loomed. On their return to the city, they received the news together that a provocative article about their relationship was about to be published in one of the most read tabloids in the country. They sat in the apartment, the tension cutting through the air. Lucas opened his laptop, pulled up the article on the screen, and read aloud excerpts filled with moral judgments and speculations. Helen closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the knot of anxiety tighten. But when she opened her eyes, she found in Lucas's face an invisible current of strength. "We will face this together." He took her hand firmly in his. In that moment, they knew that the journey ahead would be arduous, but their union was the only weapon capable of disarming prejudice and rewriting the destinies imposed upon them. And you, who follow this story pulsing between struggle, love, and overcoming, how about leaving your comment saying, "In love"? Share this journey with those who believe in the power of love that breaks barriers. Your like, comment, and share are the flame that keeps this narrative alive, illuminating paths through the stories we touch together. The publication of that article marked a turning point that no one could ignore. The next morning, as New York awoke under a grey sky and traffic began to fill the already crowded avenues, the internet and social media buzzed with comments, opinions, and judgments about Lucas and Helen's relationship. In Lucas's office, the atmosphere was heavy. The constant ringing of phones and the incessant notifications directly competed with the internal agitation of the executive, who found himself forced to mediate a crisis that involved not only his public image, but also Helen's, who was facing, unprepared, the weight of exposure and prejudice. "They try to paint us as scandalous cases, as if we were an anomaly," Lucas said to his team, his voice low and tense. "But we are more than that. We need to act quickly, with transparency and respect." Helen, for her part, felt the weight of being the center of judgmental gazes for her humble origins, for the supposed inadequacy in light of her boyfriend's elevated status. During her days at the clinic, the discreet murmurs that turned into open resistance, in the words of some colleagues, made work even more exhausting. In one of those difficult moments, while sipping bitter coffee in the break room, she heard the firm voice of Clara, an experienced and respected nurse at the clinic, who came to her side. "Helen, don't pay attention to what they say. You are competent, compassionate, and you deserve to be here. I see that every day." The comfort of those words warmed her soul, like the shy sun breaking through the clouds outside. She was not alone. With the growing pressure from the media, Lucas proposed a press conference, an opportunity for both of them to break the speculation and authentically show what their relationship meant to them. On the day of the conference, the lobby of the company building was filled with eager journalists, camera lenses, and extended microphones. Lucas and Helen entered together, wearing that silent armor made of courage and hope. Helen, in a soft-toned blouse and a determined smile, walked side by side with Lucas, who introduced her as his partner, not just in appearances, but in life. "We are here not to respond to gossip, but to reaffirm who we are and what we represent together," Lucas said, his voice firm, challenging prejudice. "Helen is an incredible woman who has taught me that love is resistance." Helen took a deep breath, feeling each of his words as a firm brick building a new path. "I am just Helen, a woman who fights every day for her mother, for her career, and now for a love that should not be a reason for separation, but for unity." Her voice trembled slightly, but carried undeniable strength. In the following weeks, the media storm gradually subsided. The public began to see beyond sensationalist headlines and recognize the humanity in their story. Their journey became a topic on television programs, discussing social differences and prejudices, and even criticisms were transformed into constructive dialogues. Meanwhile, in their daily lives, Helen and Lucas navigated the real obstacles of their relationship, seeking to balance the love that united them with the challenges surrounding them. Helen's mother's health showed slight improvements, and the collective care from friends in the neighborhood proved that, despite social differences, solidarity was a bond capable of overcoming any barrier. On a memorable night, sitting on the couch in Lucas's apartment, they watched an interview where they were highlighted as examples of overcoming and courage. The window in the background showed the city lights, a scene that now also seemed to belong to Helen. She looked at Lucas, feeling the warmth of his touch on her hand, and a smile spread across her face. "It's just the beginning," he said, looking at her with a mix of tenderness and determination. She nodded, aware that the journey would still have its hurdles, but ready to face them, for now there were no more borders between them, only a shared path made of love, struggle, and hope. "And you, who are moved by this story of passion and resistance, leave your comments saying, 'In love.' Share this journey that proves love can indeed conquer unimaginable barriers. Your like, comment, and share keep this narrative alive and strengthen the hope that together we can change the world, one story at a time." The next morning dawned with a tranquility that seemed almost rare in the hectic life that Helen and Lucas led. The city of New York, under a clear blue sky and with the unmistakable aroma of fresh coffee wafting through open windows, continued its frenetic pace, indifferent to the personal battles being fought behind the glass doors of skyscrapers and the humble houses scattered throughout the metropolis. Helen woke up early, as usual, her body still carrying the remnants of exhaustion from the past few days. The sun outside filtered its delicate light through the sheer white curtains, casting dancing shadows on the hardwood floor. She sat at the kitchen table, her gaze distant, contemplating the cup of coffee warming her hands. Each sip brought the bitter certainty that despite the progress, the struggle was far from over. This commitment to the challenge was fully shared by Lucas, who arrived shortly after, bringing with him that mix of intensity and fragility that only those who carry great responsibilities know how to revisit. His gaze met hers with the comfortable intimacy of someone who knows every scar, visible or hidden. "Good morning," he said, his voice low, like a silent promise. "I was thinking about how we can expand the social initiative at the clinic in Brooklyn. Your experience there can make a difference." Helen gave him a sincere smile, her heart pulsating with the renewed energy that only the feeling of genuine partnership can provide. "I think it's the right time to show that there can be more than prejudice within these walls," she replied, her fingers brushing against his arm, a brief gesture but full of meaning. And so, the days that followed were built around meetings and decisions that went far beyond individual love, reaching the social and community sphere that surrounded them. The proposal was clear: to transform the clinic in Brooklyn into a reference center for humanized care, with projects that integrated the community, offering not only physical health but also support and education. "We can't just react to crises," Helen said in a meeting with the local health team. "We need to be agents of change, building together with respect and understanding." Lucas, for his part, invested in the power of communication, opening the doors of his company to initiatives that would bring high society closer to the reality of people in the periphery, promoting cultural events, courses, and inclusion programs. At one of these events, under the warm light of bulbs hanging from exposed wires, Helen and Lucas walked side by side amidst laughter and lively conversations, watching children playing around food stalls and soda stands. It was a portrait of the connection they sought, a harmonious blend between two worlds that were once so distant. However, even with these important steps, the echoes of the past still lingered in episodes that tested their limits. One morning, while dropping her mother off at the medical appointment, Helen was taken aback by a biting comment from a clinic staff member, filled with veiled prejudice that almost made her hesitate. She swallowed the lump forming in her throat and took a deep breath. It was impossible to allow each of those words to diminish what they had achieved. In that moment, she felt Lucas's firm hand on her shoulder, a silent support that reinforced the certainty that she was not alone. "You are stronger than any judgment," he said, his eyes locked on hers, overflowing with protection. Helen closed her eyes, allowing the emotion to manifest in a light sigh before lifting her head and moving forward. Meanwhile, her mother's health showed slow but steady progress, and the care shared by the community reinforced the idea that solidarity was the greatest strength against adversities. One night, as the rain softly drummed against the windows of the apartment, they celebrated an important milestone: the official approval of a project that would unite public and private efforts to strengthen the clinic in Brooklyn. Sitting around the makeshift table, with handmade brigadeiros and the sweet aroma filling the air, they laughed, cried, and promised to move forward despite the difficulties that still lay ahead. "No matter how long it takes," Helen said, her eyes shining, "our story goes beyond the pages that write about us. It is made of what we build together, every day." Lucas agreed, squeezing her hand gently. "We are changing our world," he said, "and the world out there still has much to learn." At that moment, they looked out at the city of New York through the windows, feeling the vibrant pulse of a metropolis full of stories, challenges, and possibilities. And they were part of that great transformation, a story of love, courage, and resilience, intertwined with the hope for better days. And you who follow this vibrant plot, leave your comment saying, "In love." Share this inspiring journey with those who believe that love and struggle can disarm prejudices and transform realities. Your like and comment help this story grow and reach more hearts, because together we tell stories that change lives, one at a time. The sunrise painted the city's buildings in gold as life resumed its vibrant rhythm outside. Inside the apartment in the Upper East Side, Helen awoke with a mix of anxiety and hope that seemed to grow each day. Lucas was still asleep, his peaceful face illuminated by the soft morning light. She watched him in silence, the features hardened by recent battles, softened by well-deserved rest. For a moment, she realized how that man, behind the armor of a polished executive and distant gaze, carried the same vulnerability she tried to hide behind smiles and strength. Moving carefully not to wake him, Helen went to the main room window. The view of Fifth Avenue stretched far away, with the movement of people coming and going, each with their own story and dilemmas. She wanted to believe she could be part of the change that the city, often indifferent, needed. Her phone vibrated with a message from Lucas. "There's an important meeting today. I'll pick you up at 2 p.m. Together always." An involuntary smile curved her lips. The feeling of being supported by something solid gave her the strength to face the challenges the day held. At the meeting, in a modern corporate space with glass walls reflecting the midday light, Lucas presented his new social project aimed at bringing the company closer to the peripheral neighborhoods. Helen stood by his side, presenting data, stories, and dreams that came from Brooklyn. "We need to humanize our markets," she said, her voice firm and warm. "Not just move numbers, but truly impact lives." The attentive gazes of the investors alternated between skepticism and curiosity. Helen sensed the weight of veiled judgment, a silent doubt about her legitimacy in such a distant environment from her origins. During a break, one of the advisors, an elegant woman with grey hair, approached discreetly. "I liked your speech, Helen. Passion is key, but it also needs to be strategically channeled. If you need support to translate that energy into practice, count on me." Those words, simple and sincere, were like a beacon amid the fog of insecurity that sometimes overtook her. Between meetings, commitments, and clinic visits, Helen and Lucas found refuge in the simplicity of their shared routine. Cooking together before dinner, watching old movies on the couch, and even discussing music while the fresh coffee wafted through the apartment. Small moments that built a home that was not restricted to a physical space, but to a mutual feeling of belonging and strength. However, social pressure continued to loom over them. At a dinner hosted by an influential figure from the affluent neighborhood where Lucas was to solidify partnerships, Helen felt, not for the first time, the weight of curious and sometimes condescending gazes from some guests. "Maybe this isn't the ideal place for you today," Lucy, Lucas's sister, whispered as she placed a hand on her shoulder. "I understand the struggle, but these environments are complicated." Helen averted her gaze, trying not to show the frustration that welled up in her chest. "I'm here because I believe in walking side by side," she replied, standing firm. "I won't hide. Not for you, nor for anyone." In that moment, the tension between them, it became evident, an uncomfortable mix of affection and resistance, a reflection of the barriers that still needed to be broken, not only external ones but also within Lucas's own family. Later, in the car, Lucas broke the silence. "I know it may seem difficult, Helen, but your courage breaks down walls that many don't even know exist." She squeezed his hand, understanding that this love was both a shelter and a battlefield. The journey would be long and full of unexpected detours, but they were no longer alone. In the following days, new doors began to open. A network of contacts emerged, offering possibilities for the social project to gain greater momentum, with resources and partnerships never before imagined by Helen. The clinic in Brooklyn became a venue for workshops, lectures, and cultural events, bringing together doctors, patients, and volunteers. The affection and recognition began to spread like sparks of hope through the aging walls. At one of these lectures, Helen felt her eyes well up as she heard emotional accounts from people who, thanks to the initiative, found not only care, but dignity and acceptance. "This is what makes it worthwhile," she told herself, her chest slowly filling with pride. That night, sitting side by side on the balcony of their apartment, with the starry sky of the silent metropolis above, Lucas held her hand tenderly. "No matter what they say out there," he murmured, "what really matters is what we build here, together." Helen nodded, allowing herself to relax in that moment of peace amidst life's storms. "With you, I feel like I can be whole. No masks, no fears." He smiled, his voice choked with emotion. "And I've learned that to love is, above all, to accept and care." And as the city lights twinkled in the distance, in that intimate moment, they knew the path would be filled with challenges, but their love was the strength to move forward. And you, who follow this story of love and struggle, leave your comment saying, "In love." Share this inspiring narrative with those who believe that unity and courage can overcome prejudice and transform realities. Your like and comment are the energy that keeps this tale alive, echoing in hearts all over the United States. The week that followed brought with it an intense rhythm, but filled with new hopes. The social project gained traction, solidifying partnerships and even sparking interest from other regions of the city. Helen, despite the fatigue that accumulated in her body after sleepless nights caring for her mother, felt propelled by a renewed strength, the kind that comes from the certainty that love can be a real engine of transformation. On a warm Thursday morning, Helen's phone rang early in the workday at the clinic in Brooklyn. On the other end of the line, an unexpected invitation. A renowned journalist from a major magazine wanted to interview her for a special edition about initiatives that were changing the face of public health in New York. Helen felt a mix of joy and apprehension as she accepted. She knew that despite the progress, she still bore the prejudice and misplaced gaze of many. However, she was determined to show that her commitment went far beyond her background or her wealthy boyfriend's fame. On the scheduled afternoon, the makeshift studio in a room illuminated by large windows reflected the city in warm colors. Helen, wearing a light cotton blouse and her hair in a simple bun, sat before the journalist with a naturalness that seemed to unsettle those unaccustomed to her quiet strength. "What drives you to continue this fight, Helen?" the reporter asked as she adjusted the camera, capturing her every gesture. "I believe change begins when we stop looking at differences and start seeing stories," she replied, her tone firm yet moving. My mother taught me that caring is an act of love. This project is that, love transformed into action. As she spoke, she remembered the difficult nights, the constant worries, and Lucas's hand that never failed to hold hers, even when the world seemed to crumble. The interview gained prominence in the magazine, sparking positive debate and renewing visibility for the project. Messages of support began to pour in from ordinary people, doctors, patients, and even business people inspired by her courage. However, as the spotlight illuminated her journey, a new challenge presented itself at the door. In a high-level meeting at Lucas's company, he received the news that an investment fund was demanding drastic changes in the management of the project to release larger resources, including reducing Helen's involvement in strategic decisions. At a private dinner, Lucas brought the news to light, visibly torn between the desire to help and external pressure. "They want me to distance you from the decisions. They want everything managed by specialists with the appropriate profile for businesses of this scale," he explained, his expression heavy. "It's hard to balance interests, but I don't want to lose what we've built." Helen felt her heart tighten. That proposal was more than a professional challenge. It was a threat to the essence of what they had built together. "I won't give up what I represent for that project," she said firmly, sitting at the table, her eyes reflecting the determination that sustained her. "If change is to happen, it must be for the better, while maintaining the humanity that brought us here." The tension hung in the air like a storm about to break, and both knew they needed to find a path that united clarity and courage. In the following weeks, negotiations dragged on, filled with meetings, phone calls, and discreet encounters. Lucas proved to be a crucial ally, defending the importance of Helen, even while pressured by shareholders. One afternoon, at a coffee shop near Fifth Avenue, Helen met with a longtime friend, Mariana, who worked at an NGO that operated in the city's underserved neighborhoods. Between sips of strong coffee and the unmistakable smell of the aroma of cheese bread wafted from the nearby bakery as they discussed the dangers of losing control of the project. "If you're not there, what will be left?" Mary asked, her eyes conveying anxiety. "The system swallows everything, Helen." She knew that the struggle was not only against social prejudice, but also against the invisible gears of power that often diluted ideals into economic interests. That night, Lucas and Helen gathered in the apartment, the silence between them heavy with uncertainties. "We can't let them destroy what is ours," Helen said, her voice barely a whisper. "It's the lives of many people at stake." Lucas held her hand, squeezing it firmly. "Then let's fight together." "As always," he whispered. The project became a symbol of the resistance of a love that was, more than sentimental, political. With each meeting, each step taken against the tide, they reaffirmed their desire to be the protagonists of their own story, facing invisible barriers that were no less real. And you, who follow this thrilling and hopeful struggle, leave your comment saying, "In love." Share this story that shows that love, courage, and persistence can transform realities and break down prejudices. Your like and comment are the fuel that keeps this narrative alive, inspiring those who need to hear that together we are stronger. Autumn was gently arriving in New York, tinting the trees along Fifth Avenue with golden leaves that danced in the chilly afternoon breeze. Despite the refreshing weather, an electric tension permeated the air behind the scenes of the social project that Helen and Lucas had built with so much effort. In the spacious office of Lucas's company, voices mingled amidst meetings, phone calls, and urgent messages. Lucas was on the phone, his jaw clenched while his eyes, highlighted in the mirror, reflected the weariness of the endless struggle. Beside him, Helen sat in the worn leather armchair, trying to maintain the serenity her heart was struggling to achieve. "The defense of the project goes far beyond the numbers, Rodrigo," he said, his voice firm but laden with frustration. "How do you expect me to dissolve a partnership that has changed the lives of hundreds of people just because the shareholders want immediate results. "Lucas, this is business," the other side replied with an ironic tone, suggesting the fragility of the initiative in an environment dominated by figures and deadlines. Results are a matter of survival. Helen closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of the pressure that loomed not only over the project, but over her own existence. Responsibilities piled up on her, as if she carried the weight of an entire system. After the call, she slowly stood up and walked to the window framing the urban landscape, watching the ebb and flow of cars, the frenzy of people who seemed so distant from their internal battles. Do they imagine what really happens behind these figures? She thought, her heart heavy. At that moment, Lucas came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her shoulders in a silent embrace. His rough fingers, worn from labor, touched her skin with unexpected tenderness. "We can't let them win by exhaustion," he murmured in her ear. "We need to be stronger than any pressure." She turned to him, her eyes shining with determination, the kind that only arises after much struggle and pain. "Then let's show them that love and commitment are not expenses, but investments," she replied with conviction, returning the embrace. In the days that followed, the duo intensified their battle. Helen organized public debates involving health professionals, patients, and community representatives. Lucas, in turn, used his influence to open doors in business circles more receptive to social causes. Together, they built bridges where there had once been invisible walls of distrust and prejudice. At one of these events, held in the auditorium of a cultural center in the neighborhood, Helen took the stage with steady breath and a heart pounding fast, yet controlled. She looked out at hundreds of attentive faces, some illuminated by hope, others marked by doubt. "We cannot allow the system to take away our right to care for people," she began, her voice strong and clear. "Every project we serve here is not just a statistic. These are lives, dreams, and families that deserve respect." She paused, and when a shy boy from the audience raised his hand to ask something, her chest filled with emotion. The simple question, asked with a trembling voice, revealed the real impact of the initiative. It was a boy who wanted to know if he could one day be a doctor, even coming from Brooklyn. "Of course you can," Helen replied with a smile. "This project is here to open pathways, and yours is just as important as anyone else's." The applause that followed was not just for her words, but for the truth felt in every syllable. In the midst of the crowd, Lucas watched her with pride, his eyes misty, as if that achievement belonged to him more than any trophy. But victory never comes without a price. That same night, back at the apartment where they shared more than a roof, Helen received a troubling call. One of the volunteers at the clinic informed her that the clinic was facing a serious problem, compromised equipment, and an imminent threat of service interruption due to a lack of urgent resources. The news hit her like a punch to the stomach, the woman who was already exhausted but unwilling to give up. "We can't let this happen," she told Lucas, her voice choked but never defeated. "Then let's act," he replied promptly, his gaze resolute. They mobilized their network of friends, partners, and the community, organizing an emergency fundraising campaign. Social media, local radio, even Lucas's Instagram were used to spread the message. During that week, Helen visited the clinic several times, feeling the characteristic smell of antiseptics mixed with, in the humidity of the walls, listening to the buzzing of the machines that stubbornly continued to work, the pressure on the healthcare professionals who, despite the difficulties, kept hope alive. During one of these visits, she found a boy with big eyes, sitting in the colorful chair of the waiting room. He tightly held a plastic toy and smiled shyly when she bent down to talk. "You will be okay," she promised, the warmth of that moment giving them strength. Meanwhile, Lucas crossed Washington, D.C. to negotiate with lawmakers for the release of public funds. using his charm and persuasion to open doors that seemed impenetrable at first glance. At that moment, the story of Helen and Lucas was no longer just a romance, but had become a social movement, an example that love can be the driving force to transform not only individual lives, but entire communities. The road ahead was winding, full of uncertainties, intrigues and challenges, but they were ready to face each battle with the courage that only those who know how to love can have. And you, who are moved by this inspiring journey, leave your comment saying, "In love." Share this genuine story of love, struggle and transformation with everyone who believes that it is indeed possible to change the world. Your like and comment are the flame that keeps this story alive, reaching hearts all over the United States. The golden light of the sunset timidly filtered through the windows of the small apartment where Helen and Lucas shared their lives and struggles. She dropped her bag with a heavy sigh onto the worn-out sofa, her body still marked by the exhausting journeys in the neighborhoods, her heart full of fears and hopes. Lucas entered shortly after, taking off his coat, while the aroma of fresh coffee he brought on his clothes almost calmed the tension of the moment. Their eyes met, reflecting the difficult battle fought over the past weeks. "And Washington?" Helen asked, her voice laden with expectation and a shadow of anxiety she couldn't hide. Lucas sat beside her, gently stroking her cold hands with a firm touch, trying to convey that rare glimmer of security they needed to move forward. "It was complicated more than I imagined," he admitted with a heavy sigh. "But I managed to get an extension on the fund release. It's not the full amount we need, but it's an essential breath." The sadness of persistent obstacles mixed with a comforting relief in Helen's chest, who knew at that moment that the race against time would continue, but with the certainty that they were not alone in this endeavor. The campaign on social media continued to gain momentum, with passionate messages, videos, and hashtags that, in an unexpected way, echoed through distant neighborhoods, crossing invisible borders of the city. The next morning, Helen arrived at the clinic carrying the same determination that always guided her, mixed with the silent fatigue of someone who tirelessly dedicates themselves. The unmistakable smell of disinfectant, combined with the sticky humidity of the walls, welcomed the simple yet resilient life of that place. The constant buzzing of machines, the calm murmurs of the professionals, the blinking of monitors, all composed the daily symphony of hope and struggle. For the first time that day, she stopped in front of the waiting room where a boy with big eyes caught her attention. Sitting in a colorful chair, he tightly held a toy that seemed as fragile as the clinic's situation. Upon noticing Helen's presence, he smiled a shy smile, as if sharing a silent trust. "Everything will be all right," she whispered, crouching down to his level, her warm gaze trying to convey the strength everyone there needed. But victory was still uncertain. The news of the upcoming regulatory inspection, capable of condemning the clinic for lack of structure, fell like a shadow over the team. Knowing the urgency, Helen called an emergency meeting with doctors, nurses, volunteers, and community leaders. In the cramped basement, her words rang clear and firm. "This inspection cannot be the end of what we have built. We have to show that life pulses here, that we fight together, and that the community depends on this clinic. We will not back down now." A series of proposals quickly emerged: general cleaning, makeshift repairs, reorganization of spaces, a collective effort that, even limited in resources, overflowed with the will to win. As the plan took shape, the community also stirred. Volunteers mobilized, donations arrived, and the campaign gained a strength that even impressed Helen. Meanwhile, Lucas was busy in the federal capital, navigating the bureaucratic labyrinths of offices and corridors of power. His natural charm and compelling arguments tried to open doors that had been stuck until then. He made contacts, sought unexpected allies, and did not hesitate to promote the campaign, involving digital influencers who spread the message across the country. In the neighborhoods, ordinary people participated with a silent fervor, sharing information, helping with small tasks, bringing hope beyond social media, making the fight something tangible, visceral. On a hot afternoon, Helen walked near the clinic's walls when she saw a woman tenderly cradling the face of a child who was slowly recovering. The simple image, full of humanity, reignited a fire within her tired chest, a silent reminder of the real impact of all this. Back at the apartment, Lucas anxiously awaited the report on the actions at the clinic and the updates from the company board meetings. He knew that this decision would be crucial and that the divisions among shareholders could define the project's fate. They spent hours planning, adjusting strategies, taking deep breaths before each new step. In the roller coaster of the past weeks, the highs and lows drained the emotional resilience of the couple. After a difficult meeting, when disbelief loomed, Helen quietly vented in the car. "Sometimes I just want to give it all up. It feels like we are swimming against a relentless current." Lucas squeezed her hand, his eyes revealing the sincerity of a promise. "Maybe this current exists to teach us to swim better, and I will never stop swimming with you." That bond, which had been born from attraction and care, was now the foundation of a greater battle, a story that transcended personal lines and became a beacon for an entire community. It was a living demonstration that love, beyond being a feeling, can be resistance, a driving force and transformation. And you, who were moved by this struggle made of courage, hope, and true love, leave your comment saying, "In love." Share this inspiring account with those who believe that together we can change the world. Your like and comment are the strength that keeps this story alive, reaching every heart across the United States.